And talking about women's rights in Afghanistan, days after the Taliban's Interior Ministry issued a diktat regarding protests, about 300 women held pro-Taliban rallies in the capital Kabul, covered head to toe in accordance with the new dress policies for education. The demonstrators waved Taliban flags, rallied against the West, and lent support to the Islamist policies. The organizers say that the women were students. They chanted pro-Taliban slogans and spoke in support of the hijab and abaya. The demonstrators also criticized the women who protested against Taliban in recent days, proclaiming that women not wearing hijab and niqab are harming all women in Afghanistan. These demonstrations were held at Kabul's Shahid Rabbani Education Center.
भाई आगे नहीं आमिर
especially the women who have expressed their dissatisfaction from the Taliban in the last 10 years with different slogans and different ideas, and they introduced Mujahideen from people to the world. They were the same people who were affected from American colonialism and ideological occupation.
دسترسی به تعلیم، دسترسی به کار، دسترسی به صحت زنان را باید در اولویت کاریش قرار بدن و این مورد توجه جدی بکنند. توجه جدی برای رفع مشکلات زنان بیوه و بی‌وساعت و ایجاد بخش جداگانه و این منظور در بیت المال را در نظر بگیرد.
The demonstrations came in the wake of the new diktat issued by Taliban regarding protests. The Interior Ministry, headed by one of the FBI's most wanted, Sirajuddin Haqqani, has made it mandatory for protesters to obtain permits before holding demonstrations. Protesters will also be required to submit posters and placards meant to be used in protests. Permits to be able to hold protests will be released by the Justice Ministry. Protests have rocked war-ravaged Afghanistan in the recent days. Many women took to the streets in several parts of Afghanistan, rallying against the Taliban and their regressive policies. They fear the Taliban's second regime will be oppressive and curtail their rights. Despite numerous assurances by Taliban on a softer stance, the Taliban has allowed higher education for women, provided they segregated from their male counterparts at schools and also universities. These pro-Taliban rallies were in stark contrast to protests held earlier. Here, the protesters were being guarded closely by armed men, as seen in video footage. Earlier this week, Taliban members fired in the air to disperse a crowd demonstrating against Pakistan. 48 hours before the August 31st deadline, the US conducted a drone strike in Kabul. This was in apparent retaliation to the August 26th suicide bombing at the Kabul airport, killing 13 US service personnel and over 170 Afghan civilians. At the time, the Pentagon had said that an Islamic State Khorasan planner and another one of the group's members was killed in the precision strike. WION was the first to cast doubt on the Pentagon's version of events and whether the US had successfully killed whom they claimed to have targeted. Now, a New York Times report has come out saying that the US may have mistakenly targeted an aid worker and members of his family, including children, instead of the Islamic State Khorasan planner that it had initially intended to kill. The NYT has published an exhaustive video report on the subject. The victim, Esmarai Ahmadi, was among 9 civilians, including children, whom the US killed that day through a Reaper drone strike. But on August 30th, WION was the first news channel to broadcast a report by our correspondent Anas Malik in Afghanistan, who visited that small 2-story house with a courtyard in the heart of Kabul.
This is the car that was targeted. It's literally shredded into pieces. We're seeing pretty gritty scenes, not definable in words, because the smell of blood. Even now, we've seen human flesh all over the place. The house has been greatly damaged. If my camera person can show you as well, this was the interior of the car. These are the remnants of the rocket that has been fired on the car. The CENTCOM says that while they are assessing the damage, but they have claimed that it was an ISK terror-linked car. And they've also maintained that there was no secondary explosion. There was only one explosion that took place because of the rocket that had hit the car.
Malik also spoke to Aymal Ahmadi, the victim's brother, who told us that his brother Esmarai was a trained electrical engineer who was working as an aid worker for an NGO and not a terrorist. Esmarai was also among the thousands of Afghans who had applied for resettlement in the United States.
Yeah, my name is Aymal. That yesterday, unfortunately, I lost my big brother and with three sons, and also I lost one of my small daughters, and one of my brothers lost her 3 child, and also I lost one of my nephew in here. Yeah.
The US had initially announced that the drone strike had targeted a key Islamic State Khorasan planner who was again planning to strike the Hamid Karzai airport in Kabul. But it was Ahmadi's family that contested the US's claim that there was a second blast, suggesting that there was a large stash of explosives parked in Esmarai's car. Aymal, Esmarai's brother, told WION's Anas Malik that there was no second explosion. Taking note of the New York Times report, Pentagon spokesperson John Kirby said, and I quote, U.S. Central Command continues to assess the strike and no other military works harder than we do to prevent civilian casualties. The morning after the precision drone strike, there was indeed a rocket attack carried out from a similar white car to Ahmadi's. The New York Times report has shown visuals confirming this. But the killing of an innocent family fueled by retaliation and without credible intelligence adds to the more than 70,000 Afghan and Pakistani civilians who have died from direct U.S. attacks that were intended to kill terrorists. And while the U.S. has noted that, quote, it is not in a position to dispute the claims by Ahmadi's family, the burden of proof lies on the Taliban government to bring to the notice of America and the world that it was indeed the U.S. precision strike that killed innocent children as well as an upstanding Afghan citizen.
I'm standing in Khwaja Bugra vicinity of Kabul, outside the house which was targeted by US drone on the 29th of August. I thought of following up because I was here hours after the strike took place. The family has now left. There's a lock that is there on the door. You can see that the car that was targeted, that is there, that is very much there. And the neighbors here tell me that the family had left immediately after, days after that, and it's been about 2 weeks since they have not been here. While the US has left, there is clearly looks like there's a lot of answering that needs to be done, and on the part of the Taliban, on the part of the investigations, there are questions that remain unanswered. Anas Malik in Kabul, Afghanistan, for WION, World is One.